Welcome. This is Samantha Scaly, and you are listening to the Hungry for Happiness podcast, where we dig deep and discover how to reconnect into your body, heal your relationship to food, and finally feel the liberation and freedom you desire. Kleenex is encouraged, and pants are optional. What's up, Phoenixes, and welcome to episode number 12. Today, I'm interviewing Rachel Foy. I love this episode. We touched base on so many levels in this episode. Her and I both were chronic dieters for years, and we talked about having a respect and appreciation for food. And I know for a lot of people listening, they're like, I don't know how to do that because I'm feeling so anxious around it. And so we kind of go through the cycle of like what it takes in order to truly come to a place of appreciation around food, which I am very, very clear we all can get to. It may seem like Mount Everest at the moment, but with a high level of intentionality and slowing down and taking time with yourself, I know it's possible for you. Rachel is the food freedom coach. She is based out of the UK. She works with smart, ambitious women to stop fighting food, make peace with their body, and take back their life so food and weight are no longer a part of it. Her background is in clinical and cognitive hypnotherapy, Neuro Linguistic Programming, and she's a eating psychology coach. I am super excited for you guys to check out this episode. What's up, Phoenixes, and welcome back to the Hungry for Happiness podcast. I am so excited to have this conversation with Rachel Foy. I was on her podcast, what was it, about a month ago now, and the conversation was just super energizing, and I just loved the way you framed things and talked about the whole food and body conversation in a different light. You really have a beautiful way of describing it and helping women heal through it. So I'm super excited to dig into it today. So thank you so much for being here.
That was a lovely thing. You need to walk round in front of me and announce me to the world like that.
You want to be your PR? You can hire me. I'll just walk around with you all the time. So the number one, or the first question we ask all our guests on the show is, what is the number one thing about life that makes you feel most alive?
Oh my gosh. Do you know, I'm going to say food. I'm actually going to say food because for me, food it's such an emotional topic, as I'm sure that we're going to talk about. But for me, it's also about connection, and it's about fun, and it's about pleasure, and it's about enjoyment, and it's friends, and it's family, and it's love, and so I'm a big foodie. I love food. So I'm going to say food, actually, all kinds of food. I'm not fussy. Give me anything.
Oh, that is such a brilliant answer. And I love that you said that. You know, it's so funny. Given the fact that this is the Hungry for Happiness podcast, you know that no one said that yet?
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're the first one. I love it. It's super interesting. When I grew up in a family of gourmet cooks. You know, my mom and dad, we never had chicken and rice for dinner. It was always like the most incredible meal on a Tuesday night, you know? It was
exactly.
So amazing. And it brought such a sense of joy and like you said, connection and just real, like enriching moments. Like food truly enriches moments. And that was the case until I was 18, until I went into my diet depression and just was in my craziness fight with food. And I remember one of the things I was so grateful for after I really healed my relationship to food, or I was beginning to heal my relationship to food, is I began to really enjoy those moments with my family again.
Definitely. And I think
oh my God, it's like making me cry actually thinking about it.
It's true though. Like when you think about like all the people listening and watching this, a lot of them are not yet there, and they have got these demons with food, and food's an enemy, and yes, they enjoy it, but actually they don't at the same time. So I think to be able to get to that place where now, as for you, as for me, that we see the pleasure in food now, and it's not this thing that we're supposed to be fighting and wasting so much of our life trying to push away. It really does enrich the body, it enriches the soul, it's pleasurable, it's enjoyable, and it's vital for life.
I love how you're using the word pleasure, because the word pleasure is something that I've really been playing with recently. And a girlfriend of mine who was on this podcast as well. Her name's Susanna Frioni. She told me she's having this was her year to have a wild love affair with pleasure. And I just loved that concept. And so I've just been asking myself, how can I experience more pleasure? And for me with food, pleasure and respect is the word I want to use. Like I developed this respect for food again, where I thought about, wow, this plate of food in front of me, who was involved, in bringing this into my existence? How many hands touched this? Like the earth had to provide like water and air and oxygen for this to take place. Right.
Yeah,
and when we zoom out and develop this like pleasure and respect for our food, it transforms our experience of the act.
Absolutely. And I think you've just hit the nail on the head there. I kind of mentioned the word connection. I think we might talk about connection quite a bit because it's a massive power word in this topic. And I think when we do have this, it's almost like a spiritual connection to food, isn't it? Like appreciating how multidimensional it is. It's not just a piece of cake. It's not just a sandwich. It's not just a whatever. It's had so many energies infiltrating it and allowing it to kind of get on the plate for us. And pleasure is a big part of that as well.
Absolutely. I know there's a lot of people in our industry who really talk about the state of our body so say we're in a calm, relaxed state and we're just like feeling this divine respect for food. We're feeling like we're welcoming in pleasure. How we digest the food in that state is much different than if we're in a frantic, obsessive state. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Do you know what? I always use the example of cake. So cake for me was one of my trigger foods years ago. I never bought it. I didn't allow myself to have it. And then obviously if I ever did, it was in full binge mentality. So using an example of like a croissant, like a really beautiful croissant for breakfast. Back in the days when I struggled with food, I would have eaten that croissant rushed. I wouldn't have tasted it. I would have eaten the emotions of guilt and shame and embarrassment and, oh my God, what the hell's wrong with me? So I was eating all that emotion as well. Whereas if you are in that place, as you said, with pleasure and permission, and you are kind of connecting with the fact that it tastes good and it brings about all these wonderful feelings within you, then you also process that emotion as well. And I think processing, it's not even processing, we eat our emotions as well, don't we? So if we are eating in a state of guilt or a state of shame or a state of fear or a state of anxiety, our bodies are metaphorically digesting that emotion as well. And that has to impact us like energetically and emotionally and physiologically. It has to. And also we notice it, like we feel different when we eat something with permission compared to eating it with resentment and fear. It's noticeable. You can feel it. It's a physical thing. It is for me anyway.
It absolutely is. And I think that's something that a lot of people overlook is they don't realize that it changes not only the digestion, but the entire experience. And we can fundamentally decide in that moment, okay, I'm going to just calm down. I'm going to turn eating this piece of cake into a meditative practice.
Yes.
Really tasting it. Like actually like really like feeling the fork in your hand, visually looking at it, thinking about it. And just like when it goes into your body, like how do you feel as you're like chewing? Really can like drop us into like being 100% present with that act, which is and in the essence of us doing that, it just calms down our nervous system to a place of just like, this is good. This is fine. And then there's no like aftermath of the guilt and the shame and all of that because we were so conscious in doing that.
No, and I think when we're not conscious as well, like you've said, that can often lead us to be obviously very disconnected from the process. But like with me in the cake example, I wouldn't have just ever had one slice of cake in that moment. It would have then been 2, 3, or the entire thing. Because there was no connection, there was no pleasure, there was no awareness. I wasn't tasting it. I was eating the guilt, the shame, all the things that we kind of don't want to do, but we find ourselves doing by default purely because we're not allowing ourselves to eat it in the first place.
Yeah, I love it. So connecting with food, and on that topic as well, on that same thread, is connection with our body. Right. And I assume in order to be able to connect to food, like we're talking about, there is an element of connection that needs to happen within our body. How do we begin to establish that?
Do you know what, for me, I'm going to kind of use my example very briefly because sort of personal experience is powerful, because it's where we learn our biggest messages and our biggest lessons. And for me, it was actually about slowing down. And you've already mentioned it. Like when I was at the peak of my messed up relationship with food and how I felt about my body, I spent 100% of my time in my head, and I was always trying to live 2 steps ahead of where my reality was. And because of that, again, by default, I was never in the moment, and therefore I was never in my body. Like those 2 things, they go hand in hand. So for me, it was about slowing down, whether that be about my thoughts, whether that be just about life in general. And by doing that, actually learning the art of being more in the moment. You know, we hear these phrases being thrown around so often about living more in the moment and appreciating the now. And sometimes it can sound really sort of a bit woo-woo and a bit wishy-washy, like there's no power to that. It's just a statement.
Yeah.
But when you really think about it and then start taking steps towards getting to that place, there is so much power in just being more in the moment, because when we are more in the moment, we are already in ourselves. We have to be. You know, our bodies have got to be more connected to us and vice versa. So slowing down was a big thing for me, you know, not trying to rush through everything that I was doing on a daily basis.
I've heard this feedback from a lot of my clients, and it might be something that you hear as well. An objection I get to this living in the moment from a lot of people is, but Sam, what if I hate the moment that I'm in?
Yeah.
So can you speak to that a little bit?
I think this kind of goes hand in hand with things, emotional eating and how we use food to cope. And yes, most of us can experience moments that are a bit rubbish and they're a bit crap, and we don't want to be in them, and we would love to be out of that situation at the time. But again, there's so much power and there's so much expansion and there's so much learning in these moments that we feel really uncomfortable in. You know, I ran away from those uncomfortable moments for like 14 years, and that's when my relationship with myself was really, really bad, because I was constantly trying to avoid the anxiety and not sit with the fear and run away from the worry, and, you know, not really sit with those feelings of feeling inadequate or not good enough. And, you know, I know that you were the same from what you said on my podcast. And I think the more that we can just realize that this is just part of being a human being, you know, as wonderful as it is to feel joy and peace and happiness, there's nothing wrong with feeling anxiety or worry or fear. It's just kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't ever go there and that we should be trying to avoid those situations, because on reflection, for me, I've had my biggest breakthroughs within myself when I've been in those moments that I've been trying to escape from. And I think there's so much opportunity for all of us to learn who we really are when we're in those moments that we really don't want to be in.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You spoke about the peak of your battle with food in your body. And I'm super curious, what was the catalyst in you being at that peak and then going, okay, girl, I need to make a change. I need to make a radical change. Like, was there an event or a catalyst, or was it sort of like this slow suffering that occurred? What was going on there for you?
So for me personally, what actually happened is I came out of a really long-term relationship. So we've been together for like 8 years at the time. We've been together since we were like 16 or 17.
Oh, wow.
So it was a long-term relationship, and we were in the process of talking about getting married at some point. So it was serious. And it literally ended overnight, and I had no awareness that this was going to happen. Naturally, it sent me into a massive tailspin about, oh my God, who am I? What do I want? What's happened? But going back to what we've just previously said, in that moment of feeling completely lost in a big, deep, dark hole, not knowing what I wanted to do, that also gave me the momentum to start questioning so many things, as these things often do, don't they? It's like, my God, it's the worst thing in the world, but at the same time, it's also a blessing in disguise. So for me, to cut quite a long story short, I actually decided that I didn't like my job. I wasn't happy with where I was living. I was actually abroad at the time, living in Germany, and I moved back to the UK. And I completely started to shift my professional career, and I went back to college basically, and I started to retrain in something that I'd always been interested in. And whilst I was doing that, I was actually healing myself, and I was working on my biggest, deepest issues that I'd never really acknowledged. And throughout that journey, my food stuff and my body stuff and how I felt about myself, it actually started to heal itself. And this is where I suppose this is where my passion is now. It's about helping women realize that food and body image issues, it's surface stuff, it's superficial, it's symbolic, it's symptomatic, it's metaphorical. And that was so true for me. Like when I really found my passion in terms of who I really was, I really connect to that soulful, aligned element of who I was. The food stuff kind of started to dissolve all by itself.
I love it.
Which is, again, a massive lesson in that. And I'd spent 14 years at this time trying to fix it.
That's super powerful. I think, you know, we speak to women through food and body, but really those are just the behaviors that are illustrating a much deeper reason. But that's what people associate with because that's their pain point, right?
I know. And I think sometimes, and again, you'll know this from your clients, it's not that it's difficult to try and get that awareness across, but as you said, for most women, and I was exactly the same, if someone had have said to me at the peak of my stuff, oh, actually, this has got nothing to do with the fact you're not the weight you want to be, or this has got nothing to do with your lack of willpower for not eating the cake, I probably would have kind of gone, yeah, whatever.
See ya. I'm not listening to you.
Yeah. I'm not listening. Go away.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at the same time, when you are able to just go back to the moment again and kind of stand in it and start questioning, what is my reality right now? Because most women, as it was for me, as it was for you, as it probably is for most of the listeners, we get into these cycles of food dysfunction and it goes on and on and on and on. And when you get to that point of going, well, hang on a second, what I've been doing and what I've been trying has actually never fixed the problem. It just keeps getting worse and bigger and deeper. Maybe I need to start looking at this from a different angle.
Absolutely.
Which is kind of what I did.
So I know for you and for me, a lot of people that come to, and they're drawn into our work, weight loss is important. And for me personally, and I'm just going to speak for myself, it's actually impossible for me to work with someone where weight loss is their number one priority. It can't work. It just can't work. And so what is it? How do you communicate to women to shift their priority in order for them to actually heal? Like getting that emphasis off of the number on the scale and just bringing it back into what is actually real and is going to create sustainable transformation.
Yeah, totally. And I'm completely on the same page as you with that, Samantha. I'm completely weight neutral. I don't promote weight loss, and I do try to get that message across. But I think in answer to your question, for me, it's really about getting down to the very root of that person's belief. Like, why does she believe that a certain number on the scale is the thing that she's striving for? Like, we attach so much emotion to weight loss. I did. You know, my perception of this my perception of being a certain number on the scale for me, there was so much emotion connected to this. I'd started to create my own belief system that had naturally become my thought process, that had become my reality. And it was all fake. It was all false. It was all an illusion. So that is one of the biggest things that I have to do with any potential client, is really help her realize that at the moment her belief system is actually limiting her from being who she truly is. And until we start breaking down those walls and those barriers and those beliefs that she's created through no fault of her own, by the way, then that's really when the transformation is just going to gain that momentum that most of us are wanting. We do want the change. But you're right. We cannot heal our relationship with food or with our body if at the back of our minds we're still going, oh, but I'd just love to be 10 pounds lighter. It's not going to happen.
It's super interesting. Something I say quite often to my clients is, so we have this conversation of mental health, which is my conversation. It's like, how can we increase our mental health? How can we experience more joy, more vitality, just be connected into our bodies? And then we have this issue of body image. And in order to truly, and I'd love your thoughts on this, in order to truly break our fight with food in our body, our priority has got to be our mental health over our body image.
Totally. I 1,000% agree. Because I think the thing that never gets spoken about with this is arguably a mental health issue. Like how we feel about ourselves from an emotional, mental point of view, it often overrides everything. And yes, some people do have these beliefs that 10 pound lighter would make everything okay, or a dress size smaller, life would be better, they would feel more confident. But actually, in order to get to that place or maintain that belief system, you know, also maintaining beliefs is so emotionally draining that the mental health of that individual, for me, that overrides any kind of physical change to do with their body, because you know how much energy and emotion you needed to give out to maintain your personal struggles. It dictated everything that you did and everything that you partook in. And yeah, I think that the mental health aspect is definitely something that kind of gets ignored, and it shouldn't do, because it is priority above and beyond anything else, to be fair.
Yeah. Mindset, mental health, and soul set, like how we feel about our souls and our bodies.
Yeah.
So overlooked. Overlooked. We live in a world where our worth is externalized. How we feel about ourselves is externalized. It comes down to how we look, what we dress, where we live, the cars that we're driving, the boyfriends that we're dating. And that is so unfulfilling. It's so unfulfilling. And I guarantee there's people listening to this thinking that I'm full of crap right now. And they're not going to realize it until they drive themselves crazy, reaching outside of themselves for that thing that they think is going to fill them up, when really, and it sounds cliche, I know, but it's all inside.
Completely.
That feeling that you're searching for is actually inside, and you can create and manufacture that inside your own body to be able to fuel yourself and to create this like self-love generator. And when I say self-love, it's just not about like loving the lightness, right? It's about like loving the darkness, like you talked about as well.
Absolutely. I think that external search that we all kind of fall into that trap and that illusion again, don't we? That the certain clothes or certain houses, certain this, certain that are going to make us feel better. And perhaps there's a slight element of truth to that, but it's never going to be permanent. It's never going to be transformational.
Yeah.
Whenever we can start to realize that we have got all the answers within us. And yes, it sounds really cliche, but it's true.
Yeah.
Because, anything that we are desperately seeking for, it's already there, and we just need to find a way of tapping into it or accessing it or reconnecting. I really like to use the word reconnecting, because when we do talk about food and this dysfunctional relationship that we can have with food and with ourselves, actually what we're wanting to do is just reconnect back to who we are. Before the brainwashing of diet industry, before the way that society began to portray us as not being good enough because we don't look a certain way, we kind of want to go back to how we were originally before we got messed with, so to speak.
Absolutely. And like the felt sense of, I know for me, there was like a moment in my life, it was like 2013, when I finally felt that felt sense of like happiness. It was like, oh, this is mine to own, and this can't be taken away from me.
Yeah.
Right? It's not on a sliding scale. Like, don't get me wrong. When I put items in my Amazon cart, I feel pretty baller. However, that's actually not happiness. That's like, ooh, like banding on a bullet.
Yeah, exactly.
But like when I ultimately felt like that felt sense of just like love, like I'm in love with myself. It was like nothing that I've ever experienced ever. And I didn't even know it was possible. Yeah. I was chasing it through relationships, career, money, food, vanity, looking good, feeling whatever it was. Yeah. And it's mind-boggling to realize every person on the planet has the ability to create this within themselves. If they just stop, get silent, look internally, and just really like own it. And we're still looking, we're still searching the 7 C's to try and feel that feeling.
Yeah, I think the problem though, in terms of the bigger issue, like the sociological issue with this, is that, anything to do with body image, and we've kind of touched a little bit on people's desire to be a slimmer size and lose weight. There are so many things out there that we are exposed to in terms of, the messaging and society's portrayal of the female form and all this kind of social media. It's like, God, we could talk about this all day long. Yeah. But at the same time, that is still also a choice. And I love the way that you said own it like that. I love to say that to my clients. You've got to start owning who you are, because until any of us really own who we are, and that's the light bits, the dark bits, the bits we don't like, the bits that we do, it's like all of us, until we can until we can own everything and be okay with that, that's where we're constantly feeling pulled between all the different bits.
Absolutely.
And I think, stepping into that place of owning who we are is, again, it's a really powerful place to be coming from.
owning who we are and deciding who we want to be. Like
Yes.
really like making a decisive decision. Like I am deciding that I no longer am going to live under this story that's not serving me. And I'm deciding to identify with this now that I know is totally and utterly in alignment with the highest version of myself.
Absolutely. I think we all have so many stories, don't we? Like stories that don't serve us, stories that aren't true, stories that we just believe, stories that aren't even ours. They've come from other people. And with this kind of work with, you know, clients, etc., it is about helping them recognize how much of their identity in many ways actually isn't real. It's not who they actually are on a soul level.
Yeah.
And getting them to strip away the layers and the walls and the blocks and the beliefs. And yes, there can be tears, and yes, it can be slightly uncomfortable at times, but on the other side of that, there's clarity, and there's this feeling of empowerment, and there's this feeling that all the bits are coming together. And that's what we all deserve. Like we all deserve to feel connected and in alignment and at peace with who we are. Period.
For those listening who are current victims of the weight loss industry, and I'm not bashing the weight loss industry at all. That's not my job. It's really about recreating a new way of doing things. Yeah. But for people who are listening, who are feeding the system and doing the diets and the miracle pills and all of that, what is one piece of advice or insight you would share with those people listening right now?
I think, well, it's probably a few, so I'm going to keep it to one as I possibly can. The golden question. I think really kind of picking up on something that I said earlier, when you are in that circle, or that cycle rather, if you stop and start being truthful with yourself, is what you're doing right now actually helping you? Like, are you actually making progress? Do you feel that you are becoming a better person in the sense of how you feel about yourself? Because most of the time we never question it. I never questioned it. I'm guessing you never questioned it. We just kind of hop from one diet to the next, and we're trying to find the next magic cure and the next pill and the next potion. And I, for one, never actually stopped and went, hang on a second, is this even working? Like, does this really serve me? Is this making me feel confident and in control and calm and at peace and happy? And I would hazard a guess that 100% of people that ever did that, they would be quite shocked at what they would actually be truthful about, because the answer is usually no, it's not. And if that's your answer, then that's, again, your cue to kind of start questioning what you're doing and whether you should start approaching it from a different angle.
I love that. This whole diet hopping thing. I was on over 50 diets in less than 4 years. And it's actually really interesting doing this interview with you, because in the depths of my diet depression, I was living in England. Whereabouts do you live? Manchester?
Near Manchester, yeah.
Near Manchester. Okay. It's super interesting. I was up near Manchester for work, and the flavor of the week, the diet of the week was like boiled potatoes, like just eating boiled. Like, I don't know what I was thinking, but I remember being up there and like doing this like search on the internet, and it was like the 7-day diet. And like for the first 3 days, all you ate was boiled potatoes. And I can remember going to, what is that place called? Like Spuds, or there's like this place where you can get like potatoes, like they call it jacket potatoes in the UK. Yeah. But then you can like put like cheese and beans. Anyway, I remember going up to the counter and I was like, can I please have 5 plain boiled potatoes? And they just looked at me like, what is wrong with you?
Nice. No, that doesn't sound very enjoyable.
It was the constant jumping from one thing to the next. And I just did not know how to eat like a normal person. You know, and this, I want to kind of like move this conversation into like the need for connection. Like, how do we really know if it's an emotional hunger cue or a physical hunger cue if we're not connecting to our bodies? Like, do we just have no access to that?
Do you know what? That's a really good question, because I think a lot of people that come into this kind of work now, they are chronic dieters, and they have jumped from one thing to the next, and they have been relying so much on external guidelines and guidance on how to eat. So it can be slightly challenging to begin with, but I think self-trust is so important, and not really questioning too much. You know, I often talk quite a bit about bringing our energy from our head into our body. Like sometimes when people, their perception of being connected to themselves, it's so abstract because they've never done it before. even just having that thought, that visualization of imagine all your energy right now is in your head, you're thinking about food, and you've turned it into this like intellectual topic, which actually it's not, it's a body thing, it's a physical thing. And just imagine that energy, that ball, that color, whatever it might be, and just bring it into yourself, and imagine it's in your chest or in your stomach or wherever it might be for you. And from that place, then start to think in terms of food. And when I say think, I mean kind of allow your body to guide you, as in, is my body hungry right now? What does she want to eat? I'm not going to question this, I'm just going to go with it and see what happens. And usually it's not as challenging as some people might think it is, because again, it's about them now relying on themselves and not on the little plan that they've got to eat 5 potatoes for breakfast and 5 potatoes for lunch.
Potatoes, what even are they?
Lovely.
Self-trust is really what we're getting at, right?
Yeah, totally.
Like, because I this is another feedback objection I get from my clients is, but Sam, if I trust myself, I'm just going to go to McDonald's every 5 minutes, right? But it's not about that. You're trusting the wrong part of you. You're trusting your mind, the fear voice. So how do we learn to decipher between what we can and cannot trust?
I think there's an element of transition, as there always is when we're going from kind of one extreme to the other, particularly with healing our relationship with food. And, you know, if sometimes my clients might say the same about, well, if I start allowing myself to eat what I like, I'm just going to eat cheese all the time, or McDonald's, or it's going to be loads of bread or pasta or the perceived banned foods. And I always say to them, it's okay, give yourself permission. Even if that means that you eat McDonald's every day for the next 2 weeks, or even if it means that you have cheese with everything. Then will come a point when your body goes, do you know what? It's been nice, but I don't want any more. I really want something else now.
Absolutely.
And it's about relaxing into that and actually having that belief that you can reactivate and tune back into your natural body wisdom. Because if we didn't, as a human species, we would not be here, and you and I would not be having this conversation.
Absolutely. We have to realize our bodies are so intelligent.
Oh, I know. Completely, right? And like sometimes we forget about this. You know, if we think about how much stuff right now is going on as we're talking, as people are listening, it's like hormones and chemicals and cells, and, you know, things are being fixed and healed and recreated, and we have no input with that. Our bodies just do it all by themselves. And actually food is no different. You know, sometimes, again, overcomplicating this topic, and we do, when we get into the throes of food obsession, we start to make it more complicated in terms of what do I eat, how do I eat, when do I eat. And if we just step back from this food story and just really start to relax into the belief again that our bodies know, she knows what she wants, and you just all you have to do is listen. All you have to do is listen and go with that, and everything's going to work out fine.
That's beautiful. So you went from a place of like extreme like anxiety and like super activated around food in a negative way. And now you're at a place where you get activated, but it's in a positive way, right? Pleasure, respect. Did you have to go through a place of like neutrality to like be like neutral with food until you were able to have like those pleasures? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think I did. I mean, it's not really something that, again, I've suppose deliberately gone through in order to get to where I am. But I do think food neutrality is part of this journey. You know, when we can get to that place of there's cake downstairs, I can have it if I want, but actually I'm not bothered. You know, kind of taking that emotion away, that food is just food, and there's no difference to eating a piece of chocolate cake than there is to like a piece of an apple, for example. There's no emotion there, it's just food.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I did. I got to that place at some point along my journey. Because I'm sure that a lot of people do when they're healing their stuff. And that's just part of the process. And even though that might seem like so unimaginable, perhaps to some listeners right now, it's just part of the process. And wherever they are at the moment, that's where they're going to start from. And at some point they will get to that place as well. But yeah, I think food neutrality is actually it's very empowering. I mean, did you experience that as well?
I did. The reason I asked was that's the journey that I went through, is like this extreme, like highly activated, like anxiety, stress, like over obsession place, until I had to get to a place where like, okay, my intention is just to feel nothing. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because I'm all about the feels, feeling all the feels. But in order for me to feel all the feels with food, it required me to go through this like gray area of like this neutral, like I'm going to look at a piece of cake and I'm not going to be like sad or happy about it. It's just a cake. It's just what it is. And then it was like all food. I just like looked at all food and be like, everything's neutral, everything's neutral, everything's neutral. And then now I get to a place of like, what do I desire? What do I really want? What makes me feel so good? Like, and then when I have it, it's like, oh my gosh, this feels so good in my body. Like there's like some chocolate bars in my kitchen right now. And right now, no part of me wants it because it's like no part of me wants it. But last night I was like, oh my gosh, that would feel so good right now. And like, just like enjoying it and eating it is like just this really rich, dark chocolate and having like, again, a respect for it. Like I know some people listening like, respect for chocolate. What do you mean? But really it's like this act of like, I'm so respecting this chocolate and I'm so grateful that I get to experience how delicious and amazing this tastes. And like, I'm super connected to my body into the moment. And I change it into a meditative practice rather than just being like, oh my God, I've had such a shit day. I need to like shove down this chocolate and numb the emotion. It's like, I'm actually calling upon my body to heighten the emotion, have more gratitude, feel more into it, be more open in the experience of having that chocolate or whatever it is.
Definitely. And I think actually food neutrality, as you're talking, I think it's also about kind of having a bit of a blank canvas, because I think a lot of the time when we are so messed up with food and we have these beliefs about what we think we like and what we think our body should be eating and what we feel like we need to be eating, that's often part of the problem. So for me, having that period where, as you said, it was not really bothered one way or another. I think that really allowed me to really start tuning in on an even deeper level then about my desires and what was I really craving and what did my body truly desire and want, because all of that emotion had been neutralized. So I wasn't seeing like using an apple as an example, I didn't see an apple as like the healthy choice or the thing that, you know, was the least amount of calories if I wanted some kind of dessert, or I was starting to see it in a different way because it was coming from a place of neutrality. So I think it is part of the process. It has to happen.
I love that. I love that. So yeah, those who are listening right now, just if the topic of feeling pleasure and respect around food is throwing you for the ringer, don't go there yet. You know, in my work, I talk about the comfort zone, I talk about the thrive zone, I talk about the oh shit zone. And like going from like that highly activated anxiety state into like, how can I feel pleasure? You're going to throw yourself through the loops. Ask yourself, how can I feel neutral about this right now? How can I look at this piece of cake, like you said, and just feel like, cool, that's a piece of cake. Yep, it has flour and sugar and that's all the things, and it has no reflection of like how I'm feeling at all. And so beautiful.
And making sure that you appreciate that food is not a moral issue. Like it's not a moral failing if you eat a piece of chocolate cake, the same as it's not some kind of moral achievement if you choose to eat an apple over a bar of chocolate. It's just food.
It's just what it is.
Getting all that emotion away, taking it away, letting it go, and coming from a place of neutrality.
Yeah, I love that. Fantastic. Thank you so much for bringing that to the table. That was great.
You're welcome.
You are a joy to speak with. You really are. The accent, you're a great conversationalist. You're just a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much. I was
actually quite pleased, and I haven't kind of slipped slowly into kind of a bit of a, you know, that kind of accent, your kind of accent. I have this awful habit. If I talk to like Canadians or Americans, after a while, I start sounding a bit like I'm trying to stay very British.
I love it. Stay British. It's super interesting. When I lived in England, I was there for 3 years, and my partner at the time was British. Well, he still is British, but I took on the accent, but it came out Irish. So everywhere I went, everyone's like, what part of Ireland are you from? And my last name is Skelly, which is like the most Irish thing ever. I'm like, I'm Canadian. And then when I got home, everyone's like, you sound weird. And like, now that I'm living in the States, I'm like throwing out the y'alls. I'm like, y'all want to go? And I was like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe I just said that.
love it.
Anyways, my love, it's been an absolute joy. Thank you so, so much for coming on and hanging out with us and just
You're welcome.
throwing down some gold nuggets. Where can we find you?
Yeah, the best place is to hop over to my website, which is rachelfoy.com. There's some gifts, freebies, bits and pieces over there. Yeah, that's where you can find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and story with our community. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much, Samantha.
You're so welcome. Have a beautiful day.
See you later.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode on the Hungry for Happiness podcast. You can join the conversation with women just like yourself at hungryonfacebook.com. Until next week, ladies, stay classy and badassy.